In a few moments, you will hear a story of courage, strength, determination, fortitude, and the strongest will to survive. It is interwoven with love, fear, hatred, rejection, and loss. It is an individual account embedded in the historical framework of one of the most violent episodes of modern-day history. But to my siblings, cousins, and me, it is also much more than that. This story reverberates personally and deeply. It has shaped who we are, it has defined the relationships we have with our families, and influenced the lessons that we transmit to our children. Understanding the pain and suffering that our grandmother, Judith Coleman, endured as a young child is only the beginning of the tale. How she has channeled those hardships into action is what inspires us most. Her story highlights examples of kindness and humanity in the face of hate and brutality. Our family is blessed to have our grandmother's experience and legacy written for posterity through her book, A Candle in the Heart. And the rest of the world is fortunate too, to read this story, understand its importance, and make sure it never happens again. With love and admiration, I invite you to listen to our grandmother, Judith Coleman.
Gigi, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
Sam, I had, we were 6 children, and I had, besides myself, I had 4 brothers and sisters. 5. Okay? And we were 3 girls and we were 3 boys. Big family?
You were the youngest.
And I was the youngest.
What do you call your mommies and daddies?
Oh, I used to call them Mutter and Tate.
What language is that?
It's German.
Do you have a question?
Gigi, where were you born?
I was born in Czechoslovakia, which today is Slovakia. And I was born in a beautiful little town called Pišťany. That it is a spa and it is a resort, and it has beautiful parks where I used to play in the park when I was a little girl, just about your age.
Do you remember things that your parents warned you that the war was coming?
I think they didn't warn me because I just seen it. They didn't tell me much about it because it was all happening so fast that they didn't even have time to tell me, but they did. But things that I saw happen was like I got a beautiful pair of shoes, and suddenly I saw they had to be buried into the ground. So I was crying, and they were trying to explain, this is what has to be. But they didn't have a chance to explain because they felt I was too young even to understand it. We were all sitting by my Shabbat table in my house, and suddenly rocks came through the windows and it shattered the whole window, and it came into our Shabbat room where we had in the dining room the table set, and we suddenly got up, hid under the table, ran out of the room. It became a frightening, devastating situation that, of course, I could not understand why and what, but I knew that seeing my family run and being petrified of the situation was just very, very scary and very frightening, seeing that was the beginning of the war that was coming.
Were you ever scared?
Was I ever scared? Scared? I was petrified. I was petrified because this wasn't the normal times, normal life for me. I used to be used to playing with my siblings and running around and not caring about anything. And all of a sudden, it was very frightening what was happening around me. Everybody was afraid. Everybody was afraid what will happen next. And I saw my brothers coming home all beaten up and bloody noses and very scary. And we have to live under locked doors because we were scared to go out. So it was very scary. We were in hiding as non-Jews. And my parents were caught in hiding as non-Jews, and I happened to be home that morning when the Gestapo came and wanted to see our papers because somebody reported that there are Jews living in the apartment as non-Jews. And they came to check our papers, and I happened to be home that morning. And when they they came in and they beat on the door, and I was playing on the floor, and all I saw was their shining boots reflecting my face and myself playing. And they asked for my parents for the papers, and my parents gave it to them, and they took it. But my parents said, we need our papers. And they said, we'll get them back to you later. It turns out later when I went to the kindergarten, and my siblings all were in school except a brother and a sister who came home for lunch and stayed home with my parents. And that time the Gestapo came back and took my parents away with my siblings, and I was told in kindergarten that my parents were taken away. We became fugitives. All my siblings, my two brothers and my sister and myself, we are now a fugitive, and we have to go in hiding. And we were put into hiding, except my brother and I found out, my brother basically found out that we could see our parents for the last time at a train station. And my brother was very brave, and he took my hand, and we decided to go to the train station to see my parents. And sure enough, in the big crowd at the train station, there were a lot of these non-Jews at the crowd. They were laughing and happy and happening. There were there was a cattle train lined up to put all the Jews into the cattle train. And in that big crowd, we looked, and finally we spotted my parents, or they spotted us. And my father was yelling, keep away. He was warning us, keep away from us, stay away, live, and don't come near us. And they were pushed into the cattle train with my brother and sister, who were also little young, 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. And they were pushed into the cattle train, and I was crying hysterically for my parents. And then a guard came over to me, held a gun to my head, and said, if you don't shut up, you will be one of them. I will throw you into that cattle train. And that was another moment that I knew that I wanted to survive. I wanted to live. And I stopped crying instantly, because I knew if I cry, I will be thrown into that cattle train. And I knew I didn't want to. I wanted to live. And it somehow, I got the strength to understand it, to know what's going on. Being so young and still knowing that I didn't want to be there, I wanted to live.
After everything that happened, why didn't you give up, and how did you still believe in God?
Because I was hungry for life. I wanted to live. I had the joy of living. And I always looked at things as for the better. I never dwelt on the bad. I just wanted to continue my life and make something of my life. And I had that positive attitude that I really want to be something, somebody, and that gave me courage and strength. And I really believed in God, because I felt that God was always within me. He was always in my heart. And that was my strength, that I could depend on Him and hold on to Him to give me a way to the future life. And I never gave up that hope.
If your parents were alive, what would you tell them?
My parents were alive. I guess I would be grateful for having them. And if my parents were alive, I always dreamt of my parents being alive and someday they would find me.
Show them what you're doing. Show them your family. Continuation.
I have been blessed tremendously. Look around you. I mean, I have the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they're all a blessing. That's the gift God has giving me for believing in Him and for moving forward. And He gave me this tremendous gift. They said, door for door. And I always say to my children and grandchildren, Kenyerbu, we should only multiply. And this is what my parents would have enjoyed. Seeing the blessing that I have gotten through life. And I thank God every day for this blessing.